Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast is about the journey to a more sustainable future in order for us to be able to do our bit to achieve net zero. I'll be discussing a variety of topics with experts in their field in order to educate and increase our knowledge of clean energy, electric vehicles and the electric vehicle infrastructure. So whether you're an individual wanting to make a difference at home, a small business or a corporate, this podcast is just for you. So on today's episode, I've got Graeme Warnell, and he's the director at EV Xbox. And we met at Greenfleet Juice. It was December, wasn't it, Graeme? So thank you for joining me. Thank you ever so much for joining me on this. So it's really fascinating talking. We just had a conversation before recording this, and I think everybody watching and listening are going to find this a really, really fascinating conversation. So Graeme, can you just give me a little bit of background to what you did before starting EV Xbox? And it's not to do with Xboxes, is it? As in, my son likes an Xbox.
It's not, no. Sony haven't sued me yet for the name, so it must be okay. So where do I go? My background, how do I summarise it? So I'm 30 years in refueling and energy. 24 of that was in BP, covering everything from maintenance, design, construction, safety, risk assessment on petrol filling stations, UK, Europe, South Africa, and a little bit of Mozambique. I had a cathartic moment where I suddenly woke up and said, morally, I didn't want to have an association with the oil industry at that level anymore. So walked away from the best paying job I ever had. And set up my own consultancy to say, right, how can I actually help organisations like this and other organisations have a better approach, not just to safety, but really also the environment and environmental protection and the holistic way we design and manage things. So that's where I set it up. So that's where EV Xbox came from, really following the clean energy transition, because if there's one thing I really saw, as I was leaving that side of the industry, and I see even more now, is EV charging infrastructure is pretty devoid of what I would say any competent risk assessment process at the moment, and that concerns me.
So go on, give me an example of some of the sites that, obviously we're not going to point fingers at anybody, but give me an example of some of the kind of the things that you've seen on site when you've looked at EV charging installs.
Yeah, so I always kind of call this the paradigm of negligence versus ignorance. So I don't think anyone's deliberately doing anything unsafe, but if you don't understand the risks, you're never going to know. So some of the surveys I've done, classic one is basement charging. I've gone into a basement, I've seen the charging infrastructure all installed. The basement had a really nice sprinkler system, but all the cable trays for the electric have been installed underneath the sprinkler head. Therefore, the sprinkler system will not work. Now I go and look at things like that and say, how come nobody saw this as an issue? Whether you're the installer or actually even the building manager or the building owner, what is happening? Went and saw another fleet depot, local authority fleet depot, and the scheme, they hadn't installed it yet. I managed to get in there as they just supplied the scheme, was to install a run of 7 EV chargers, and they were 1.5 meters from a diesel pump used to fuel all of the wagons and the lorries, which was then 3 meters from the above ground diesel tank, and there'd been so much spillage here. You were literally standing in diesel whilst you were looking at where the EV chargers would have gone. And again, I say, how is nobody seeing this, again, from the installation, from the design, or even from the operation of the site? And it's because it's a skill and a risk set that I just don't think people have absorbed yet.
That has just gobsmacked me. I was gonna ask you, now that my brain's coming back thinking, oh my God, how dangerous. What are the safety mechanisms generally that organisations need to be looking at before they actually even install? Because we're looking at before this, aren't we? We're not
Yeah.
looking at the install. It's got to be before that, hasn't it?
So ideally, you get in there at the design stage when stuff is being designed. But a lot of the stuff we've done, a lot of surveys we've done is retrospectively as well. So
Yeah.
the things we'll typically look for on a site, we look at the risk of fire spreading, within a charging location or within a facility. We then look at the risk of that fire crossing a boundary, so it's then outside of the facility. We look at risk of vapor cloud explosion, which is rare, but if it's going to happen, it's going to be a basement or a car park. We look at public safety very, very carefully, because actually fire is one of the risks, but if you're going to actually, get seriously ill, it will be smoke and fumes which make you seriously ill. And we look at the proximity of, accumulations of people outside eating areas, bus stops. We especially look at what's around the infrastructure. Do we have schools? Do we have nurseries? Do we have care homes? Do we have a plan to notify people if something's going to go wrong on a site, to how they're going to protect those vulnerable people? Because your no-win, no-fee smoke inhalation lawyers now, they've overtaken from the slip and trip guys that we knew 10 and 15 years ago. The second one, as well, as we look at how you're going to manage the fire water. So when the emergency services come along and they put a load of water onto an EV vehicle, how are you going to manage that runoff? Because it will be contaminated. It's an offence. It's so well legislated as well under 1991 Water Resources Act and Water Industry Act that if you can't mitigate that risk, you don't really have much of a leg to stand on. And the EA prosecute on that. They're very hot on fire water control. And this is something that people don't realise. If you're on a public road, it's the responsibility of the emergency services to protect the environment. If it's private land, it's your responsibility. It's not the fire brigade's responsibility, it's your legal responsibility. So we look at the control of fire water very closely. Again, we look at emergency ingress and egress. How are you going to get the emergency services into the site? And what's the site going to look like when you've got mass panic and everyone's trying to get out of the site as well? And so we look at one-way systems, traffic calming measures, and things that actually might create dangerous bottlenecks. And then any site specific. So again, we're always looking proximity to sensitive water courses, anywhere where we think there could be a specific risk to that site that's unique. So these are the things that we look at, all bundled up in our overall risk assessment process. And as I say, risk assessment is nothing to be afraid of. I mean, we don't come along and say, oh no, you can't put it there, or no, you have to put it 15 meters away from that building. It has to be reasonably practical, which is what we come in and we try and do. So there's only a couple of, I think, locations where I've gone in and I've really said I would be concerned if you put EV charging here. One was in a disused basement car park in London under a residential building where someone had already concreted in all the smoke vents. So you shouldn't be using it as a normal car park. So that the argument wasn't about putting the EV charging in there. The argument was about it's not actually fit to be a car park under a residential building anyway. And when we then work with our clients to find mitigations, and we're not telling people to say dig it all up and move it somewhere else, or you're going to have to invest another £30,000 to make it safe. Most of our recommendations are small and sensible because they're about reducing the risk. And in the eyes of the law, that's what they'll ask you to do. Identify a risk, and can you remove it or can you reduce it?
So obviously when you were doing what you're doing for BP, it's quite obvious, isn't it, where the fire risk would come from with regards to fuel. So what? Obviously, there's the thinking about kind of electricity and water, and so with regards to EV charging, where is the biggest risk in fire with regards to fire? Where does it? Is it the vehicle? Is it the charger? Is it, so
Yeah, proper. I mean,
where would you be
from
looking?
so we work with a couple of organisations who try and capture the information around every single recorded EV fire globally, which is a huge task. They're by no means capturing everything, but there's some good information coming out from it. And in fact, the NIPV, which is the Dutch National Institute for Safety, they produce some brilliant statistics because actually they're so much further down the EV adoption line than we are in the UK, and they have the added challenge of being the most densely populated country in Europe. So they have all of the risk factors there. Yeah, it comes from, if something's going to happen, it comes from the vehicle, but people need to understand that an electric vehicle fire actually doesn't have to involve the battery either. Now, if you look at the hierarchy of vehicle fires, whether that be petrol, EV, typically number one is arson. It can happen to any vehicle.
Yes.
Number two, electrical wiring fault can happen on any vehicle. Look at the recalls we had with Vauxhall Zephyrits catching on fire in driveways. Electrical fault. Third one, accident damage can happen to anyone's vehicle. So we don't get drawn into this argument of saying, oh, is the EV more dangerous than the ICE car? And I do roll my eyes a bit when people start getting dragged into that rabbit hole. What we have is any vehicle that has a latent source of energy in it, whether it be liquid or gas or electricity, has the potential to release that in an uncontrolled manner. And what we say is, if we look at petrol filling stations, we've got 100 years of legislation and we've got 100 years of experience that have designed out as much risk as we can. With EV charging, we're just shoving in boxes and walking away from it. So, even if one was slightly worse or better than the other, I cannot accept the fact that one has full risk assessment and the other virtually nil.
God. So, right, how do you, and I know you've kind of covered this a little bit, how do you get the charging infrastructure to retrospectively mitigate these issues?
Most of it, most of it at the moment is education. It's getting in front of people. It's talking to them. It's getting to understand it. So if I'm working with a local authority or a bus operator or even an oil company, and I'm doing my risk assessment surveys, I always say, please send some of your team with me. Please send some of your people out to walk around these sites and see what I see, because then you'll increase the level of knowledge in your own organisation much more. Ultimately, at the end of it, you shouldn't actually need me, but I can't be the only. If I'm the only person doing this within my small team, we're not going to learn on a quick enough kind of timeline in order to keep this as safe as possibly can. So it's mostly education, and like everything, seeing is believing. And when I come out and point out, there was one, local authority again. I was reviewing the scheme, and the EV charging was going next to the store where they stored about 500,000 plastic bags for recycling materials. But when you say, do you think there's a risk of fire spreading from there to there? They absolutely agree, but it was almost they'd never just put two and two together and seen it before. So that's really, so we do the physical assessments, but we really try and make sure there's a learning process behind that as well. And we don't just come out and say, oh, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. We always try and say, right, and here's the solution, and here's what you can do, to make your site safer. And a lot of this is actually also around procedures. It's about people. It's just not mechanical things. When I say, would any of your employees know what thermal runaway looks like? And they all go, no. So it's a very visible and physical thing. When thermal runaway happens, you get a lot of noise, you get hissing, you get popping, you get smoke coming out, white and then black smoke coming out from below the vehicle. So it's, if you know what that is, then you can raise the alarm early. the quicker you can respond to something, the less damage you have to people and your assets. So, it's just raising awareness most of the time.
I was going to say, because I suppose it's the going back to it's sort of, you don't know what you don't know. So,
Yeah.
and actually, when people don't know because they've not thought about it, that's where, for example, if we talked before we start the recording about you speaking at the Levi Roadshow, Cenex's Levi Roadshow in Preston, didn't you? So that education piece, you're starting to kind of get
Yeah.
out there to actually educate people.
Yeah, and it's just having an honest approach. Yeah, and this is we try and stay in this middle ground of we get as frustrated by the anti-EV lobby saying, electric vehicles are the end of the world, and we get equally frustrated by the super pro EV lobby that's just saying there's nothing wrong. Yeah, truth's in the middle. Yeah, this is anything
Yeah,
that's engineered,
yeah.
designed, made is never going to be perfect. It's always going to go wrong at some stage. It's how do we react to that? But we've become completely desensitized to the risk because we're just used to plugging in our phone, walking away, plugging in our laptop, walking away. So this is what we're used to. That's our behavior around charging now, whether it's a vehicle or a small, mobile device.
I mean, even kind of, I was looking. I've got an iPhone, and the battery's starting to get a little bit jiggered, and I was looking at the cable, and I could see that there's a bit of fray on it. Now, I do get a little bit. We had a fire in our old house many years ago, and ever since then, if there's something that I think might be a little bit dodgy, I will, like a cable, I will replace it. But not everybody does that. I remember
No,
when I was a kid.
you're in like the 5% of people that do, and I've seen this with refueling infrastructure. It doesn't matter actually. It doesn't matter if it's a petrol pump or an air conditioning unit or anything.
Mm,
Assets degrade over time. They get bashed, they
mm,
get beaten, they get abused. Cars will get involved in minor accidents. You will have unseen battery damage. We already see cable theft, becoming more and more predominant. Yeah, when you get on-street parking, there's no copper in these cables, but people won't think about that. They'll try and steal them. You don't know what damage they're doing to your car. You don't know what damage they're doing to the charger. So if you're a charge point operator, you can't control the quality of that vehicle, and you don't know the history of
mm,
that vehicle coming onto a
mm,
site. Again,
mm.
no different to a petrol filling station, but different sets of rules and regulations. So we see it, getting worse, and this kit isn't cheap either. So typical scenario. I mean, my kids hate me because at night I go around and I unplug everyone's phone at night. Because I don't want them charging at night. It's actually it's the worst time from a safety perspective you could charge. But actually, if you look at electric vehicle charging and actually electricity pricing, it's the cheapest time. So
Yeah, you're
there's
right.
quite a dilemma there. And you get your brand new iPhone, fantastic, and you go out, or you get your Samsung and it comes in a box and you've got the cable, and then the cable breaks. What do? You're on the motorway, you buy the whatever cable. Yeah, that will do, plug it in. It's
Mm,
not an OEM cable, it's just the
mm.
convenience. So suddenly, are we plugging really, are the devices that compatible we're plugging into? This is an interesting conversation that's going on in America at the moment regarding Tesla opening up its charging points to non-Tesla vehicles.
Yes.
Were they designed? This is beyond me in terms of like software a little bit, but were they designed for that? Is there anything that we're missing? Because the Tesla charger presumably was designed to talk and connect to the Tesla vehicle. So,
Because they've opened it up in the last 12 months in the UK as well. Some of the supercharger networks been opened up to non-EVs as non-Teslas as well, isn't there?
yeah.
So I'm
And that's
assuming
driven
that.
by the need for demand, and the need for demand is going to push us to roll out EV charging infrastructure and faster and faster and faster and faster. And if risk
Mm,
is perceived as slowing it down, which in my mind it shouldn't, if you do a risk assessment, you're just rolling out your infrastructure responsibly. But I think we'll build up a bigger problem for the future. And we know how this works. Something will go wrong badly somewhere, and everyone will start pointing it at everyone else. And liability and ownership, Liz, is a key issue here. Everyone thinks someone else is responsible for doing the risk assessment. So the classic example I have, multi-storey car park, I'm dealing with a local authority, so the parking team connected to the CPO, and they've gone out there and gone, charges, put all the charges in. Within the same local authority, the fire safety manager has come along and said, oh, I don't think that's safe, it doesn't look safe, turn them all off. So they're all turned off now. So you spent £100,000, yeah, you're getting no return on investment. Then the car park insurer comes along and says, why are all your charges turned off? Our fire safety chap said they're not safe. Okay, we're not insuring your car park. So this is just,
No.
and this is it's an amazing site. I went down there. If they'd done a risk assessment and they'd installed those EV chargers 15 meters further to one side of the car park, there would be absolutely no issue. They would have done everything as reasonably practical as they could. Cost of a risk assessment, it's percentages / fractions or percentages to the amount of the total investment.
Oh my God.
But, it just, and it's kind of, that's a real cautionary tale that we now say to some, local authorities. They just, have your program, engage with the right people to help you with risk assessment. They won't slow your program down, but they make sure you get it right first time.
And it's that level of joined up thinking, isn't it? So don't do it all, do it separate, do it together as a project, and make sure, like you say, you get the right people in, the right risk assessments, the fire officers, the insurance companies, make sure everybody's happy. Because like you say, that's probably hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of unusable equipment.
Yeah, and as a local authority, are you happy letting people charge in an uninsured car park? I don't know where the law stands on that, but I know it's definitely not a desirable position to be in. But good news is, things are changing. Some people are starting to wake up. So we're engaged with a significant bus company, a significant supermarket, a significant oil company, and a whole raft of local authorities now who have said, thank you for talking to us. We didn't think of that. And we're moving on with them. And, they really are now saying, it's important to get it right first time.
So what feedback did you get because when you did the Preston Senex Levi Roadshow, what feedback did you get from local authorities then? Because it's specifically targeted, isn't it, where lots of local authorities attend?
I mean, the Levi Senex Roadshows are absolutely fantastic. I'll have to, even if you're an attendee, or actually if you're a speaker or exhibitor, they're really good. I mean, I gave my presentation. It's not, doom gloom. It's not end of the world. It talks about the need for sensible risk management, sensible risk assessment. But normally when I finish it, you just have this whole room of people who are just thinking, we didn't think of that. But it's quite. But then they reach out to you, and as I say, every local authority works differently. They all have different budgets. Some of them will turn around and just say, "Oh, Graeme, can you come and do the surveys for us?" And with some of them, they're saying, "Oh, yeah, well, we haven't costed for this." And I'm like, "Well, then that's quite dangerous. But okay, then let's do this another way. Why don't I come and train your teams? And if you do it, in-house, that's another way of managing, some of the risk. At least, for open air charging in some of the less complicated structures, they become self-sufficient. But, when you get into basements and car parks, it does get quite technical. And I always say to them as well, involve your local emergency services. They will thank you for it, because whatever you install, they have to turn up when it all goes wrong, and everyone looks at them. So every step of the way you can. They're busy people. They can't always be there all the time, but keep them engaged, because it can be a massive difference actually between a prosecution and a non-prosecution. And I always use the example of firewater for this. So you've got a car park, you've got some vehicles on fire. You know what? Within a matter of minutes, if it's an ICE vehicle setting an EV on fire or an EV setting an ICE vehicle on fire. It's irrelevant. You're going to have a multi-car fire. So the fire brigade are going to come along. If they know through your emergency response plan, or if you've had a conversation with them to say, look, this is our site, this is our drainage, and this is where the fire water will go, and this is the point at which it enters the local sewer, and we've installed a very low cost manual valve to isolate that drain, would you isolate it for us in the event of a fire? And you know what? Fire brigade will probably do that, and they'll probably thank you for it. And simple stuff. Paint it red, stick a label on it. You know, we've done work with railways where we've painted different drain lids, different colours, so people know which stream of waste goes where. But if that fire service has to turn up and they're confronted with 20 different, drain covers, they're not going to stand there lifting every single one up to decide which one leads to the sewer, which one leads to the, into the environment or into a river. They're going to fight the fire, and then you're liable for that. So, really engage with the emergency services.
Talk about the emergency services. Do you remember? And I know you don't want to probably discuss the whole ICE versus EV safety, but last year when there was that Luton Airport fire,
I was there. I was waiting.
Were you?
I didn't. Just for the record, it was not me. I was waiting to board my plane. And I could see there was a fire in the car park. And then luckily I could go back there 2 days and I rescheduled my flight to see the carnage. The car park's still closed now. There's still so many cars in there that they can't recover. But this is my big bugbear with UK legislation at the moment is, it's ICE fire or EV fire, the design of that car park, it was never going to survive. The root cause is irrelevant. That car park's never going to survive. We really need to have sprinkler systems, misting systems, better detection if we're going to keep these car parks safe. Because if we look at the way the motor vehicles evolved, they're all much bigger now, regardless of what type of vehicle they are. There's loads more plastics. They have a much higher fire loading. They have a much higher toxicity if they burn in terms of smoke. You get much more toxic fire water in terms of what runs off of them. Vehicle to vehicle fire spread is quicker and quicker and quicker between car bodies covered in plastic. So we just took our eyes off of this completely. So forget EVs. I think most car parks aren't fit for purpose in terms of safety sometimes in the event of a fire. Just the way our demand for bigger and bigger vehicles has evolved.
Yeah, and actually after it all came out, because was it a petrol or a diesel Range Rover or something like
which
that?
Which conspiracy theory do you want to pick?
Oh, I know. Well, exactly. But people had photos of the reg, and you could take the reg and you could put it into the database to say what kind of vehicle it was. But there were still people saying that it was a conspiracy, and that the fire chief had kind of said, "Oh, it's not EV," and but everybody was saying, "Well, it is EV," and it was just ridiculous, wasn't it?
Go back to the hierarchy of fires. I've heard it was arson. It can happen to any vehicle. Then some people have said, it was a diesel vehicle. Well, it could be a diesel vehicle, but it could be an electrical fault. It could be an electrical vehicle and be electrical fault. It could be a hybrid vehicle and it could be electrical vehicle. So, we get too hung up on this apportionment of blame. We saw it with the bus fires in London. I think we had 3 bus fires in 1 month. One hybrid, one electric, one diesel. The world goes into meltdown because one's electric or one's hybrid. No one cared about the diesel one. No one was pulling diesel buses off the streets of London. But this is inevitable. These things are going to happen. It's just how we manage the risk process to deal with them.
And there has been arson on buses as well, whether they were electric, hybrid, diesel anyway. There's been arson attempts on various buses, so we don't actually know whether that's what happened anyway, do we?
You put your cigarette through the rear engine vent of the diesel bus as you're walking past it. So it's stupid things like that, but they happen.
So if we're looking at best practice, and you've kind of indicated with a fair amount of this, but what would best practice look like with regards to, I know we're talking about multiple types of EV install, aren't we? But what
Yeah,
would you say?
this is it's a tricky one because there are some guides out there which they say they're best practice guides. They're best practice guides based on what we know at the moment, but they're not what we call ACOPs. They're not industry recognized codes of practice. And the challenge is you can look at one document and it says, it tells me to do this, but every single site is specific, which is why we say, guys, you need to do site specific risk assessment. I think Zurich issued a paper 2 months ago which sent everyone into panic, saying you can't have an EV charging within 10 meters of a house. Yeah. So what happens? What happens if your neighbour is charging his car on the road in front of your house? Does that invalidate your house insurance policy? But I've surveyed sites where I've said it's safe to put EV charging against a wall, and I've surveyed other sites where I've said it's not safe to put EV charging against the wall, because the sites are all unique. So there is some good guidance, obviously sensible guidance. Keep it away from anything flammable. Keep it away from anything combustible. Have a way of managing the firewater, isolating the firewater. Yes, you might not be able to contain all of the firewater, but if you've done the best you can, then that's reasonably practical in the eyes of the law. And training, make people aware. The amount of AV charging I see that doesn't even have CCTV. Who's monitoring this? I go up the motorway, and whenever I'm there, I'm always snooping around the EV charging facilities, and I see it. You park your car, you go and walk 200, 300 meters, to get your coffee. You sit in there and have your coffee. 15, 20, 25 cars, all charging. Not even a CCTV camera. So, where's who's keeping an eye on that? Where's your early warning system? So again, not rocket science stuff.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right on that. And we talked before, didn't we, about kind of Kate Tyrrell and Leah Knight from Charge Safe, who were doing lots to kind of try and improve things, kind of safety on that side, and look at lighting and CCTVs and things like that. But yeah, it's that I know that's something that's really, really important. Do you know what I wanted to talk about? I wanted to discuss the thing that we were talking about before we started recording, which is where you live and what and the kind of how you actually heat and light your house, because this was really, really fascinating. So you live in Krakow, don't you?
Yeah, I live just outside of Krakow, about 15 kilometers outside of it. I've been here since 2008, on and off. UK here. But yeah, I'm quite an environmental person. Despite my background through the oil company, my cathartic.
We won't hold that against you. We won't.
Woke me up, and yeah. So I look at it, and I look at the whole clean energy transition, which we're massive supporters of the clean energy transition, but my view is less. Is the problem we have with the environment is we just consume too much, and we need to learn how to consume less. So this is when I probably get a little bit unpopular with the car industry to say, whatever, trucks, Tesla truck, Porsche Taycan. Guys, is this really still embodying, when you look at the size of the batteries and then how we're going to dispose those batteries, is this really embodying, a green culture? So we took, in our house, we just said, okay, we've got 2 cars, let's get rid of one. We said that's the best thing we can do for the environment, because more different cars aren't the answer. Less cars is the answer. I use public transport wherever I can. We have a well where we have water. We have grey water recycling in our house. We have a heat pump. I got PV solar panels which generate actually the majority of my electricity, because we're quite lucky here. We're on a scheme where you use what you generate, and then the surplus goes back to the grid. And a lot of my friends said, "Oh, how did the economics for that stack up?" And I said, "You know what? The economics wasn't my first priority. My first priority was the fact that I've got young children, and I'm concerned about the world that they're going to grow up in. And if anyone knows it, Krakow is in a depression. We still have a lot. We have a lot of coal in the villages outside it. We have a lot of vehicles. You have lots of old vehicles, and typically in the winter, our air pollution levels can be 5,000 times higher than the EU recommended levers. So you're talking proper toxic air to the extent where sometimes you I don't want to go outside for a walk.
No,
So
that's like a soup of toxicity, isn't it, really?
it's horrific. It's one of the top 5 most polluted areas in the world globally. So it's up there with some parts of India, China. It's horrific. So we didn't want to contribute to that.
So how, right? So I can't believe you've got a well. I've got to say that one. That would.
It's really common. Like nearly everyone in the villages has a well, so it's a really common thing. In Poland, because actually we don't. When you get into the villages, you don't have sewerage and things like. The reason so many people burn coal is a lot of the village doesn't have gas, doesn't have that type of infrastructure, and coal has always been the cheap thing to go to. But I love it. I drive around and I see more and more and more houses with panels on them in Poland, and it would work because it was subsidised by the government. And
that's good.
And this is what you have. If you want people to change and adopt, you got to support them, and you say, well, somewhere you need to part the economics and say, am I doing this for purely economical reasons, or am I doing this actually for the better of the planet and the climate and everyone who's going to come after me?
Absolutely. And like you say, you've got, how old are your kids?
My oldest daughter is 21, middle daughter will be 15 next birthday, and next week my youngest daughter will be 12.
So this is for the future of your family, isn't it? It's we all need to be doing something like that. I love the fact that you're self-sufficient in this, Graeme, and you're off grid, and everything that you're doing is, on that side is actually, like you say, trying to reduce that. What was it, 5,000 times?
Yeah, higher than the EU level. That can be quite common. That can be quite common in the winter in Krakow. It's really funny, but it's because at Christmas it keeps the relatives away because they all want to come here for Christmas for the snow, but no one wants to come here for the air pollution. So,
God, oh my God! But I suppose if everybody, like you said, people are now starting to move towards solar panels at least.
Yeah.
With that incentive from the government, then it will help.
The city of Krakow, so kind of like the main municipality area, they banished the use of coal furnaces, coal fires. You can't even have a wood fire now, and you just saw the air quality pick up. So actually, the air quality in the city tends to be better than the air quality in all the villages around the city. So, and they were talking about banning any diesel vehicle older than 2009. So this isn't like a ULEZ, you pay to pollute, total ban. You can't drive it into the city. They're talking possibly 2026 for that. That would take about 25% of the cars off the road.
Good grief.
So, But you know what it will do? We'll have all these old diesel cars, and where will they go? They'll go east or they'll go to Africa. So we'll actually just move that pollution problem to countries and continents less well equipped to deal with it. So we have to be mindful in terms of environment and the climate, that it's not just about sweeping your rubbish into somebody else's garden. Because we're all on the one planet.
Exactly. And if you think about, I'm sorry, I get a little bit on my orange box about this one, but whoever thought that taking everybody's recycling or whatever it was, plastic waste and stuff, and dumping it in the middle of the sea was a good idea. I could say something really rude, but they need the bumps feeling, don't they? Because actually, it's things like that. It is like you say, just pushing the problem somewhere else. You know,
we humans won't save themselves because it wasn't cost efficient to do it, which is kind of the madness of the scenario. What I think we're facing for the future.
There's a lot of work to do, and I think you are a really good person to speak to specifically. You know, with regards to kind of as we've been talking about the safety of the charging network. I wanted to finish by just getting you to kind of just let everybody know how to contact you. So obviously, like you say, you've been on the Senex road shows, but there are people out here, in the UK that will need your services, and those of your colleagues.
So we got a website which is www.ev-xbox.com. Email me info@ev-xbox.com. And just don't be afraid to reach out. It doesn't matter if you're a big organisation or a smaller organisation, and individual. Anything that we can do to make the way you go about your daily business or run your business or manage your business safer is important for us. So reach out. I'm on LinkedIn, a lot as well. And if you want me to come and talk in your organisation, I'm more than happy to come along and just sit down and have a talk to your transport planners or your fleet managers or your design teams. More than happy to come along and just start that conversation, because if we can catch this at design stage, perfect.
Absolutely. So everybody get in touch with Graeme. I think this is what you're offering, Graeme, is really, really needed. So I really appreciate you coming on and actually talking to me about this. I'm sure everybody, like I say, listening and watching, will have really, really kind of taken a lot from this. So I'm going to end there and just say thank you ever so much for your time. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Liz, and thank you for inviting me.
Not a problem. And I'm going to say thank you for listening and watching, or watching and listening, whichever way around you're doing it. And I shall see you next time. Thanks then. Bye. Thanks for watching this episode of Electric Evolution. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons to stay connected with us. And if you're inspired by our journey towards a sustainable future and want to support our mission on a monthly basis, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Electric Evolution Podcast. Your support really helps us to bring the latest insights and discussions in the world of clean energy, electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging and sustainability to you. If a regular subscription isn't what you're looking for, you can always consider buying us a coffee. Just head over to www.buymeacoffee.com/Electric Evolution Podcast. Every cup helps us to keep the electric evolution moving forwards. And if you're curious about our work in the EV infrastructure sector at Full Circle Continuous Improvement, why not visit us at www.fullcircleci.co.uk to find out more. And if you want to send me a message, you can always email me on liz@fullcircleci.co.uk. And finally, please don't forget to share this podcast if it's sparked your interest. And let's keep spreading the word about all of these topics that we're covering. So, until next time, see you soon. Bye.